I'm just going to see. I'm not using any of these things, I just wanted to hear what I had on. That's all right. So now I will hit record on this. So like I said, this is just a general conversation. We sit down and have a chat. It's just like shooting the breeze. We don't have any beers, unfortunately, but you know, it's a bit of fireside chat about, you know, yourself, your career, how you got to where you are now, and you know, even any current affairs issues that you think are relevant to people who might listen to this podcast. This podcast is in its beginnings, and we're really trying to, you know, educate people about the manufacturing and engineering industry, and look at where careers can take people. I know from my perspective, I would have never thought that I'm in the position that I am now as the executive officer of an ITAD. It's supposed to be trying to facilitate for industry skills and careers. So for our listeners, I'll introduce you David Fox. David Fox from LA Services. I've known LA Services in, well, probably over the last 20 years and through its evolution. And I met you, David, I think initially with our first podcast
That's right.
guest. That was John Cook, and we were really on a journey around leadership, and I know you've been doing a lot around that yourself, around your own educational process, but I won't sort of take away your lead, but if you can just sort of explain to the audience who you are, where you're from, and maybe we'll talk a little bit briefly about your career and how you've got to where you are today.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Leon. Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, I guess, to go from where I started, which was a fitter machinist apprentice, not far from here at John Hine and Son, although they were down in Leichhardt at the time.
Yeah.
And in the big old factory they had down there. And then I think the first 12 months was really moving up to Bankstown. So it was a bit of an adventure, I guess, for me, coming from school into Year 10, into that sort of environment. So coming from the lower Blue Mountains into the city was a bit of an experience in itself.
Where were you in the lower Blue Mountains?
At Blaxland.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't really enjoy school.
Me too.
So I looked for an apprenticeship opportunity. Was really keen to do something with my hands. That was kind of what I was naturally good at. Kind of wasn't really keen on the idea of being on building sites and stuff. That scared me a bit. I was a pretty small kid. Didn't really think that was a good idea. I liked routine and those sorts of things. So I thought, well, factories are probably the go to go. Really enjoyed woodworking, and that's how I was trying to pursue cabinet making or something like that. Because I guess it's very much the arts part of it, you know, cabinet making, but didn't really cope well with the dust. So I ended up in machining. And I guess it had the same meticulous type feel to it, but it didn't have the dust, dirt, but not dust. So I pursued that. Parents were really supportive of that. So then, yeah, we got into an apprenticeship. That was in late '87, I guess. I was in Year 10, and then landed one at John Hine, and then started in the January there. Not really sure. I guess not really thinking about where that might take me. It was just something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the work, and I really enjoyed it. Really loved that time. The learning by doing, I guess, is the way I put it. You know, doing the TAFE one day a week, and then in the workshop the other day is actually doing things, and then doing TAFE. And I found that I went from school where I really struggled to do any subject other than maybe tech drawing and the metalwork, to actually really enjoying it. And I think a turning point for me was onto the first exam, sort of, I guess, one term in or something, and I kind of done what I'd done at school. Is I turned up and done what I had to do, but I hadn't really tried that hard, thinking that this was a journey I was on, that was it. I wasn't smart enough to do anything really academically, and I ended up getting a really good mark in the exam, and I thought, hey, if I tried, what could I might do? And then from that day on, I guess I've always pursued that lifelong learning, which is kind of how we ended up in a leadership group together.
Yeah. many
years later. Yeah. So that journey, I guess, I spent about 7 years, I suppose, in the workshop. Overall, then I had a couple of years at John Hine, I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to go up in the drawing office and work with one of the engineers up there and do some stuff around, the design stuff they do and issuing jobs and getting used to, I guess, the back end of manufacturing, what happens there. And then I got into 3D modelling, did that, and then so that was interesting to get into CAD/CAM work. That was sort of mid-90s, early to mid-90s, I suppose. Did that, and then I did, then I went back downstairs for a little bit, just through changes that were happening. Did a bit of spare parts in between there too, so a bit of customer engagement and stuff, which was surprisingly enjoyable, for a guy that probably was a bit shy and didn't like to be at that customer-facing end. I actually did enjoy it. Again, I think because of the confidence around I knew what I was doing, and could add a bit of value there. So that was good, I think. And then I went downstairs. Then I thought it was time to kind of move on a bit. So I then went on into project management around fabrication type work. So didn't move far, I guess, from Bankstown to Punchbowl. A little shop down there, and that was a lot of fun. And the leader of that business was really interesting, and probably the first time I've been exposed to a leader who was kind of had a bit of a vision about what manufacturing might be, and skill development and careers and things like that. So, he was very he'd come out of ABB, so corporate, and had this business as a bit of a hobby, I suppose. Him and his wife. So he put a different spin on what it could be about, and taking things a bit further. Through that journey, I guess I started to learn more around organising projects and things like that. And in parallel to that, I started to go to uni to do I guess just backtrack a little bit. I did my trade, and then I was enjoying that so much, I went and did night school at TAFE. So I did a certificate, I think, in mechanical technology or engineering, whatever it was called. And then that let me get into a diploma, I think an associate diploma at the time, around in mechanical engineering. And again, I was doing it because I was just enjoying the learning, like the theory part of it, rather than doing it to deliberately, get a promotion or do something like that. It was just I was enjoying what I did, and so I was kind of got into this routine of 3 days a week, or 3 nights a week at uni and working 5 days a week is what I did. And so, sort of towards the end of my time at John Hine and going into the project management role, I started at UTS. And, that came about. I mean, I never imagined going to uni ever. And I can remember back when I was thinking about what I might do. I flirted with the idea of marine biology might be interesting, but when I found out how to go to uni for that was just off the table. So I just didn't even bother. And then years later, I found myself going to uni. So it was a really strange experience in that side.
I think that's one of the things that I feel some commonality with myself. I've always been a bit daunted by the idea of going to university study, and I think a lot of people who, particularly from trade backgrounds, have that fear too, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's right. And so I kind of went into it a bit blind, I think, not really knowing what I was getting into. So I just started on it, and I did enjoy it. I really did. I mean, I had to work really hard at some of the subjects, particularly because leaving in Year 10, there was a big gap between the maths, particularly around Year 10, and even the TAFE stuff to where uni started. So I had no idea what they were talking about from day one around some of those subjects, around physics, particularly mathematics. Really struggled. So just had to work really, really hard. And I went all right. I got through it all. It took 8 years part-time because I was working full-time. And in that process, married, kids, sort of, a whole lot of other things came on board. But I guess it was, a soft introduction, and little bit by little bit, it got more and more taxing. So, but it certainly went fast. And again, I didn't pursue it to make a leap into some amazing career or become an international or anything like that. I just did it because I was enjoying the learning and that lifelong learning thing that became embedded in what I was doing. And I guess the difference between TAFE and uni certainly was the finding a way to solve a problem rather than just solving the problem, which is kind of where the TAFE sits at. They kind of teach you how to use the tools around you to solve it, where university you're kind of confronted with the idea of, this is a problem, how might you solve it? What tools might you pull together, or what you might develop to solve that problem. And it also introduced other aspects around management, sustainability, sort of thinking forward, much further forward than I had been taught previously, where I was kind of just dealing with the day-to-day stuff. So I finished that, had a year off, and kind of just worked. And I did a couple of sort of short courses around community college, just around work health safety, a couple of gaps I had that I thought were useful. And then I decided to go back and do a Masters of Research. And again, the idea of spending more time in classrooms didn't really excite me, but the idea of doing a deep dive into a subject.
What's the Masters by Research, if you don't mind?
So I was in managing projects in small business,
Okay.
in particularly this environment, this LA Services environment, that engineered to order environment.
Yeah.
So sort of it started around what sort of project management tools might help to better understand where you're at in a project, your effort versus your progress, cost control, those sorts of things. But it actually morphed into more around organisational project management, and taught me a lot more around systems and structures, and I guess how do you organise people to actually do work, not physical work, but kind of get through engineering type things or organised systems. So it was an interesting experience, and I mean it was a bit again it was just did it because it was interesting. There was opportunity there, and it was a research training scheme placement. So it wasn't any fees. So it was useful because it was tied to industry.
Yeah.
So it was a good pathway for someone like me because I probably couldn't afford to go and do an MBA or something like that, and not that was probably of interest either at the time. So that was a good I guess educational opportunity to do that, and having a research degree has kind of helped with what I'm thinking about my further development and where I might go. So through that, I guess I came to LA Services I think in the last year of that it was the last year of my degree, my undergrad. I came to LA Services, so I did my whole research degree while I was here, drawing on I guess the experiences that I'd had through a couple of big projects with Woodside and Shell particularly.
Can I just take you back just to John Hine?
Yep.
What did John Hine do?
In terms of the
what's their product and service there?
So they're a very traditional, very old manufacturer in Australia. 1886 they commenced. So one of the older ones in the scheme of Australian manufacturers, and they were the designers and manufacturers of sheet metal machinery and can making machinery. So really complex mechanical systems. Like it's just amazing. And so if you want an introduction to mechanical engineering, certainly a great introduction.
They run a foundry and stuff as well.
Yeah, so they got a foundry. So when I was at Leichhardt, it was the machine shop down there, and the foundry was up at Bankstown already. So we moved the factory in behind the foundry at Bankstown, and they shrink the workshop down quite a bit. And and then my role down there was machining parts, and then doing, as I said, some of the design, some of the sales, and some of the processing for work to be done.
Yeah. Now moving into LA Services, and you're talking about your technical role here at LA Services. What do LA Services do?
So they're a designer and manufacturer of industrial pressure equipment, mainly servicing oil particularly, but oil and gas, and a little bit of chemical and water treatment sort of products. So they and it's been an evolutionary business. It started just as doing service work around boilers and those sorts of things around power stations with the founder Louis Schwefretti. Because he was a welder, that's where you start, I guess, in small business. And then it progressively grew. Obviously found the niche in the market. You'd have to give him credit for rocking over to WA and knocking on the door of Woodside and getting work out of those guys, as well as Caltex and that kind of grew the business. So it really did grow in terms of its size and physical footprint, not so much its workforce, but its physical footprint through the Woodside investment in Northwest Shelf. So we worked with Woodside from Train 1 to Train 5 and Pluto. Yeah.
So this is one of those few places where they employ boilermakers and they actually make boilers,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, very much so.
So the specialisation, and I said to you before we commenced today, was that I always knew this place as L&A pressure welding, because that's really what the core to what Louis was doing was around welding pressure vessels with specialised welding techniques.
Yeah, that's right. It has been very much around the boilers and particularly pressure vessels, heat exchangers, those sorts of things, and always been very focused on that product, that output.
And when I first met you, and you were starting a journey really in transitioning this business, weren't you? Because the work that was in the oil fields up Northwest Shelf was sort of drying up a little bit. And I think industry across Australia was looking inwardly at themselves to say, well, what's the next step? And what were you guys addressing then?
Yeah, so that's right. It changed a lot in a short time, really. Because it was kind of business as usual from when Louis started it till around sort of, I guess, late 2010, something like that, around 2010. When I started in 2006, we had 18 months pipeline of work, and it was turning customers away. You just couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
Didn't matter what you did, they just continually just throw stuff at us. But that really did change sort of after the Train 5 particularly, and I guess that was a disruptive innovation what Woodside did there with modularisation, so building big modules in Batam, Indonesia, and then shipping individual vessels up there, putting them on a big module, bringing them back and bolting them together on site. Really changed the dynamics of how things were done.
Yeah.
And it was also engineered out of Reading in the UK, so there, again, it just kind of moved that procurement conversation from your local to a global, I guess, platform. We started to think, what's going to happen? That model that's always been was kind of disappearing, and there was, whispers around, perhaps refineries are going to start, closing down in Australia and things like that. But I guess at that time, no one believed that might happen. So we started to look at where else could we add value, and really around project management, brownfield projects rather than greenfield. So sort of helping engineering services work. So we started to look at that and had some success in there, and had some good projects with some good local customers like Origin and AGL, Gemini with the gas distribution starting to come online then. So built some skills around those areas, and I guess an acceptance that those big projects probably weren't where we're going to get revenue from in the future.
Yeah.
So we started to look at how could we not really changing what we did, but just where do we kind of focus ourselves. So we improved our systems and project management, things like that, to try and deliver better in that area, just be a bit more organised around how it was done from the past, which came with moderate success in places, but it was I guess the start of a mindset shift about that the model that the business grew up on wasn't going to last forever, and other things needed to happen. And in some ways, thinking back, maybe that was a good segue into where the more recent thinking's been around digital and what might happen there. So that was a bit of an introduction into you can pivot yourself. And if I look back at what we were doing in 2006 versus where we were in 12, 14. We've made some fundamental shifts, particularly around global supply chain and having direct contact with South Korea and Europe and the US to buy product in, rather than using agents in Australia to do that work for us. Just kind of developing our own supply chain, developing a logistics partner to help bring materials in, so freight forwarding businesses, understanding insurances around freight, things like that. So, they were incremental changes, I guess. And if I reflect back, they were sensible decisions, and probably big changes for the business. But at the time, it didn't really seem like it.
Yeah. And I think, I guess that's a lesson for any organisation that's enjoyed success over time, and they face this flip or paradigm shift, and how they adjust to staying in the market, isn't it? What about your staff? What have you experienced there with trying to either attract or retain staff, or get skilled people to do the work that you need to do when you've gone through this transition? Yeah,
I mean that's probably one of the bigger challenges now is around skill, and not just not just in the workshop where it's kind of always been for a fair while, but also finding new skills in the project and office environment, engineering environment. You wouldn't think you would, but I mean, the way we look today, is not really attracting the next generation, and that's a real issue. And then, of course, the social idea or ideas of what manufacturing is also hurting us, because you don't even get, people don't even look at what you're doing. They wouldn't even contemplate it. That might genuinely be interested. So you kind of get pigeonholed into we're dirty and dangerous, and we're just this boilermaker shop, and we don't do anything else. And people that I guess do take the time to learn a bit about us, or come see us, or through engagement that we do through the community, kind of I'm a bit surprised sometimes at some of the things we do. So that is a challenge around doing that, and so we're looking across diversity in the workplace around gender, different values that can bring and how that might do it, and looking at the different functions of the business, where before it was always about just the fabrication and welding. So now we're looking at more marketing, business development, the engineering, the project management, the tender and bid writing, and looking at them for what they really are and what we probably should be doing in that space, and then trying to craft, I guess, a bit of a brand and a perception around some of those different things to try and attract new talent.
Yeah. And how about the actual guys that do the welding and that, so the blood and guts of what you traditionally have done, had that continued?
Yeah, it's continued. We've got a younger workforce now than we had before, but the pipeline's a struggle, definitely a struggle. We had a lot of trouble last year, or the beginning of this year, trying to get apprentices, just not interested. And also, the younger guys are bringing a bit of a different view. The older guys very much, we start at 6, we have morning tea at 9, lunch at 12. Where the younger guys want to challenge that a little bit around, so they're looking for a bit more flexibility and a bit more freedom around, what the day looks like.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that, they're kind of a bit more driving around the skill development. So, your Boilermaker apprentice always just went to TAFE, and whatever you learned at TAFE, that was it. And that was my case too. What I learned at TAFE, that was it. You didn't sort of question it more with the employer, and I want to learn this, I want to learn that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a good conversation with the apprentices some time ago, and then they all said the same thing, that they really felt that the welding wasn't being covered the way it should be covered through the TAFE system. So we set up our own sort of training program there, and found a guy who was willing to kind of come in one day a week for half a day and train the apprentices around all the different processes that we use, just to try and build those skills in that area. So yeah, they're still Boilermaker apprentices, but they're actually learning the welding as well, so the cross-skilling. And as a business with people on the ground, we need tradespeople that do both now. You can't just be a Boilermaker or a welder, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. I guess, and I'm involved in a project at the moment, which is going to be a pilot. I think you're on the industry reference group as well for the NETM. Are you part of that?
I think so, yeah.
That new education and training model, which is really around what they're calling micro-credentials or skill sets. And it's something that I've sort of been mulling over in my own mind, because I'm an advocate for trade skills, because I think the portability of those trade skills are important. When you go and put an ad in the paper and you're looking for a fabrication tradesperson who can work in your factory or on site, you're expecting a certain level of skill, and it's something that I've been hearing from employers for some time about the lack of close skill alignment to the workshop that is being taught within TAFE, for instance. And that's not really being given the attention that it needs, and then industry are moving towards this thing like micro-credentials, and everybody wants something different. So I'm interested in your perspective about that effort that you've now put in to give that context to your workforce. Do you think that's portable into a larger market, like all apprentices getting that sort of skill, or do you think it's just particular to the business that you do?
I think that's a real challenge, that micro-credential thing. On one side, it makes a lot of sense, because manufacturers, they're all different, and if you're an apprentice in a workplace, you're probably only going to get the training around what that is in terms of your workplace thing. So if they up the workplace participation and leverage or lean on that to get more training, then you're going to get a narrower set of skills. And what does that translate like in terms of their portability to other things? I guess it depends on where they came from. So, I'm kind of, also in the camp that, we do need TAFE to be delivering across the principles or fundamentals of the training in general. If I reflect on, my fitter machine and apprenticeship, I didn't really do any fitting at John Hine. I was always machining. Although, I can still distinctly remember lots of things I learned at TAFE around fitting. So I think that has a place. Depending on what the definition of a trade is going forward, and what they like. And I also think that as technology starts to come into a business, that could really narrow the channel more so. Because I do wonder about even small business keeping up with technology changes around equipment. Years ago you'd buy a bit of equipment and it was as good 10 years later as it was the day it was bought, in terms of doing what it was designed to do, in terms of contributing to the thing. But if you think about additive manufacturing or something like that, those machines aren't going to be competitive in 5 years probably time. So equipment turnover is a concern, I think, for small business, which means that what sort of exposure are people going to get in the workplace to that sort of technology and the churn, and then can even TAFEs keep up with that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's some unexplored problems emerging around as technology starts to shorten the shelf life of industrial assets.
Yeah.
And what happens with training in that space.
Have you had in-depth conversations with your apprentices and relating your experience as an apprentice to theirs?
Not so much here. At other places where I'd worked, I'd spent more time, but I kind of, I guess, in the role I'm in now, I am a little bit detached from what goes on the ground, and I have lots of other things that I have to deal with, so limit. Although I am finding that with the relationship with Liverpool boys around the internships there, sort of they're sort of digital interns, I guess. They're sort of around newer technologies that some of those practical skills are still useful. If I just reflect on a couple of weeks ago, we were talking around just soldering some stuff and making a circuit board up, and the young cadet we've got who's now at UTS around that around their associate degree in advanced manufacturing. He doesn't have any practical experience, so that was all completely foreign to him. So so those skills that I developed in that phase of my training and learning are actually useful for him to So I guess as maybe we start to look at that, how our workforce is becoming a bit more blended. So you're looking at some of those sort of soft hand skills in a technical environment. They could be places that some of my skills could help develop that.
So, and I guess something just popped into my mind, and I realise now that you're actually undergoing in the pilot of the applied technology qualification, the diploma with Skills Lab. How's your experience going with that?
Yeah, that's been really good. Overall, I mean, there's for a number of reasons, I suppose. I went into it again for the same reason, not because I want to be a technician in the Industry 4 space, but I found that working with the data scientists we have here at UTS and another engineer I've got who's quite strong on business intelligence and sort of the other tools around I guess that suite of things, 365, the application of digital in business systems. I found that between those two, was not understanding the fundamentals of the conversation. I had this big skills gap that was evident to me. That was something that it was a bit alarming, really. That all these years I've been able to hold my own in a conversation, be it around material science or around process engineering or whatever. I kind of understood what was going on, what could be said, and all of a sudden I was left high and dry. I had no idea what these guys were talking about. They start talking about SQL databases or relational databases or protocols for moving data around and accessing information, so other software platforms. So I guess I enrolled in that course just because I thought, well, okay, I've got a base knowledge gap that I need to address, and if I'm in a position where I need to be making decisions around how do we implement and how do we utilise technology going forward, then I probably need a baseline knowledge around some of this stuff. I can't ignore that. Or ignore it at your own peril, I suppose. And I wasn't comfortable with making decisions about stuff I had no idea what I was really talking about. So you either got to trust the individual completely, or go and do some work to say you've got a bit of an idea, and let them do the detail and the refining of it, but at least you can understand the basics of what it was. So in terms of the course itself, the online part of it was brand new for me. Like, I've never done online learning, as I guess many things changed through COVID, but one of the things that was really interesting is I just finished a week's training. We were operating a PLC lab in Perth, so we were using a virtual machine in Perth in a classroom there. They had cameras set up so you could see the lab, and there was a lecturer in the room there, and then we were writing PLC code, downloading it to a test rig, and then running the test rig from my desk here in Sydney. So that was a really interesting introduction to for someone, I guess, of my vintage. To be confronted with having to do that for a start, and then actually going through that process of learning in that type of thing, and at the end of the week, reflecting on it, it was a really great experience. Like it kind of pushed me into a space I never would have gone. I learned a whole bunch of skills around, and I guess it gave me a practical feel for the application of virtual machines and what you can do.
I was going to ask you that because it's interesting coming from excuse me, this industry, which is generally hardware, how do you see the application of that sort of skill set in an organisation like this? Because from my perspective, when I was trying to introduce this to industry, and you were one of the industry people we were talking to, people trying to relate this new diploma of applied technology, which I rudimentarily say it's about turning things that are analog into digital, and creating digital twins or models that can then collect data and help you make decisions. It's the extension of lean manufacturing, if you like, from my perspective. I'd be interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's a fast journey actually, because sort of almost finishing that week, and I'd read a little bit about what virtual machines were, but didn't really understand them. And then I found the conversation here around looking at applying a 3D CAD package to the place, or we have one now, but I mean using a product data management system to underpin it. And then to do that, we have to run a virtual machine, which is the most cost-effective way of doing it. So it was ironic that I had that experience, and then stepped out of that into a conversation around setting up a virtual machine to run a PLM platform. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, I had that tactile feel that I guess someone like me is always looking for. That I get what this is now, and I get what it's doing. So I've been able to roll into that conversation, I guess, with a bit more confidence than I might have. By having actually sat there for a week using a virtual machine, understanding what it can do and what does it really mean. So yeah, I think you don't know where these journeys are going to take you. You just don't know. But if you don't try, you never know.
Something I've got to commend you on is that you haven't had any fear. For someone who I know is not that outwardly, you're not a stand-up sort of look at me type of person, but you step into things with courage. And have a go at them, and I really admire that about you, David, which I don't see with very many people at all. They use risk as a shield and don't want to pursue those things that they feel are scary to maybe pursue. I don't know if you actually feel that they're scary, but I haven't seen many people who take on those sort of new challenges with the amount of fervour that you do. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, they are. They do scare me. Like going into these places, like I just don't understand anything about it, so you've just got to sit down and work your way through it, and then when you get to the end of it, it's not that difficult. But I was saying that to someone the other day that reflecting back on some of the big lessons we've had and some of the big learnings we've had, across success and failure. When I sit back and look at it in hindsight, I think, well, it's not actually that difficult, but at the time, it's just completely confusing and alarming. You just don't really know what to do. So I guess it's like everything. You learn as you go, and then once you understand it, it doesn't seem that hard. But learning it is difficult at times and is uncomfortable for sure.
Do you think there's an opportunity, because you've gone into the full diploma, which is really designed for the technician? So we're plugging these people into industry in the future. We hope for those organisations that can see the vision of that. Do you think there's an opportunity for us to redesign or create a micro credential of sorts for industry leaders like CEOs and GMs, that they could get a handle on this, so that then they can see the effectiveness of implementing it?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thought that should be explored. Reflecting on what I'm learning. I mean, not everyone's going to want to do the full diploma, as you said. There's lots of things in it that I find, well, I've done that before, and it's not really a big deal. I mean, my motivation for doing it was an opportunity to do this, and also, I'm pretty passionate around, how do we build the skills in this space, at a workshop level. So, my reasons for doing it really were motivated by the fact of I want to understand what the training looks like, and how is that really going to integrate with the trade team. So, I mean, the best way to kind of do that is to experience it, and then you've got a fair sort of baseline to work from around thinking about how you might do that, and you understand what they're going through, what the training organisations are going to put people through. But if you step back from that and go, okay, as a leader of a business or a manager or whatever, you don't need a lot of those things that are probably in it, but there is certainly some fundamental things that probably need to be translated across, so that I guess the industry has a fundamental understanding, as it does now. Everyone kind of knows how plates made and how steel's produced and how pipe's done and how things are welded together or formed or whatever. Everyone's got a fundamental understanding across that stuff. So again, I think there's aspects of that will need to be common knowledge across, all businesses and leadership management to really be able to just work with those technologies and utilise them.
How far into it are you now? Are you halfway through, do you think? Or?
I think a bit less than halfway. I think, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and it's kind of been, I guess like all pilots, been a few bumps here and there. A couple of things. Some things have gone really well, some things not so well. But they're adapting really well to it and really take the feedback on board. So that's working really well. And so I kind of sometimes take off my student hat, put my GM hat on, and have a chat to them about it, from that angle. And they're really receptive to that. And so they've kind of pivoted a little bit recently around what they're doing and how they're communicating what they're doing, which is if I've got the student hat back on, it's really helped about where we're going and what we're doing.
Yeah. And as a GM of and you're not a large business, you're probably on the verge of small to medium as an enterprise. If you could access someone who has these skills, would you have a place in your business now for that skill set?
Yeah, definitely, because we are we're trying to develop the skill, I guess. So if there was people off the shelf that could be plugged in, there's things we could do to kind of accelerate our adoption of technology. We know where we have to go and we know the things we've got to do, but we've got to sort of work our way through that because it's fairly new for everyone still. Some of it's not. Some of it you can just plug in and do, but you have to also own it. You can, just getting an integrator in or something like that, kind of only partly solves your problem. You do have to really understand what it is, and if you're going to leverage the data, and also, just thinking about the data, the data lessons. That's probably where most of our lessons have come from, is understanding the value of data. If we didn't go through the process we've been through, we wouldn't understand the value of it and how we need to push it into shape to make use for it down the track in a digital twin context and those sorts of things. That's been a big learning curve for us.
So for the uninitiated, and look, I always grapple, I think I know what I'm talking about, I'm sometimes not sure. But tell me if I'm wrong, the way I would simplify this is to say this is about putting in hardware to collect data and then putting data into a language or a way that you can then make decisions about the way your business operates. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And I think every business is going to be different in its application, but for us, there's the operational side of the business, and there's some companies doing that really, really well already. Lots of people doing that really well already, and managing their organisations have great visibility across what's happening. So that's not particularly new. So that's one, I guess, track of what we're doing, and the other track is around the product itself and building a data pool around the product. And again, there's systems out there that do it, but putting those systems together is the tricky part. And then there's some obscurity around, depending on what you're doing, there's some obscurity around how do you bring in, what data do you really need to make good decisions around product life cycle and things like that. So that's probably where most of our work is going, is about what data do we really need and what performance have to be in for us to do what we want to do around analytics and particularly maintenance in the future.
So, and I'm not going to disclose any of the conversations we've had previously, but you see a place for that in a product or service that you might offer in the future? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I think as manufacturers, you've got to learn to start getting the product in some form, particularly if you're selling larger assets. Again, everything's different. I mean, if you're manufacturing a consumer good, maybe not, but where you're manufacturing equipment that other manufacturers use to produce their products, and it becomes an integral part of their operation, then I think smart products are going to be inevitable. So learning how to deal with that and crafting business models that will support that, both in terms of supporting your customer, but also supporting your own existence through revenue streams, is really, really important.
It was exciting to me when we were having these conversations in the past about the possibilities of extended services, and I always relate Tesla and Elon Musk and what he's done with his businesses in the way they look at the technologies that they create, and then how you create new businesses out of those technologies. And I think those opportunities are exponential.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, for me, as someone who's sort of sitting, I'm 30-something years into being in manufacturing, it's a really exciting prospect that manufacturing now has this opportunity that other industries have had in the past. And it doesn't matter really where you sit. If you think about the way services, that makes large industrial assets that are largely static. Who would have thought that thing would ever be smart, and who would have thought that might have a human interface? So if you start to package all the different jobs around that and the careers around that create and service that as an ongoing environment, it's a really exciting prospect for a business like this to kind of completely reshape what it is, and to bring a whole new set of career paths to the community that would have never existed.
Yeah. And I guess for your staff, and I always think about the trajectory that you've been on, where you've started off as an apprentice and then transitioned because you've taken on the opportunities about learning and opportunities in different parts of different businesses. Now you're at the peak of leading a particular business in its journey. What sort of message could you give to your younger self, or someone who's maybe starting out their career now, around that and taking on those opportunities?
I think, if I reflect on that, and also, some of the young guys we've had through here, through internship programs or whatever, and even apprentices, I guess, having a plan's good, but more so a general direction on where you're going, and don't kind of look for the immediate, I do this, I get that. It's a continual journey, and you don't really know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
So just enjoy what you're doing at the time, and as your interests with views change, move with that. Don't sort of steer away from it, move with it, and certainly take on, jump in, take the risk if you think it's something you really want to do and you're interested in it, then try it out. Just try it out. That's probably the thing that I've learned most over the last 4 years or so when we've been really playing in this technology space. Is we've just decided to try it. We haven't waited to have the perfect environment for an internship learning relationship with school. We have a physical environment with wonderful learning spaces and things like that. We're just an average manufacturing business. We're talking about just sitting around and we've got ad hoc on the setup, but it actually works. We've been able to deliver some good results around that internship learning program. And if we had waited for we had ourselves set up right to do it, we never would do it.
Yeah. You eventually got to stick your finger in it and go, don't you?
Yeah, and have a go.
Yeah. And so what about and I guess that leads to your side of things, what sort of advice would you give to other people who are sitting in your seat in other enterprises to engage with younger people and bring them into their business?
Yeah, it's there's elements of frustration around employing younger people. They have a different view of the world and a different approach. But to succeed, we're going to have to work out how to make this work. And I've learned some interesting stuff off some of these guys that have come in. So I think you've got to try. Don't force it. You've got to find an organic approach to it. Maybe don't kind of go in there with an expectation that this is what we're going to get out of it. It's an organic thing. Just try it out. If it doesn't work, stop it. Try something else. Reflection and try again. And I've certainly had that with Liverpool boys. There's been 3 really different interns come through. We've got the 4th one now, and this 4th one, I guess we're drawing on the lessons of the last 3 around how we're approaching it. I have a bit of a direction about some things I'd like to go through that model as far as developing some capability in the business. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. I'll probably learn something else this next kid that's come through. And in terms of employing graduates and things like that, they've all, most of them are pretty short term so far, but they bring some new thinking and some new ideas and incrementally move us forward. I think that's the important thing, is the incremental progression. just as I guess a lot of communities are actually changing things a little bit. And that might be a combination of, is the business ready for it in terms of its equipment, its investments or infrastructure, or is it ready for it from, owner of each? They're both elements that can affect the outcome. So you just got to incrementally try things that are digestible at the time. Yep. And then if you look back, you'll probably find you've moved quite a bit.
Yeah. So, what about currently? Do you have opportunities available for people? Have you got the full staff complement that you're looking for? Or have you had any trouble recruiting?
No, we haven't got a full complement, and we are having trouble, recruiting, retaining, those sorts of things. We've just been through a round of that where we've recruited and then lost what we had. Sort of thinking back on that the last couple of days, I think there's some cultural challenges there around, this is how we operate and looking at, sort of people that might fit for what we are now, because, we do want to change, but we're not changed yet.
Yeah.
So the reality is you have to look at what it is, but then on the flip side, you're trying to bring in some new people that bring new thinking and a new approach. So finding a balance, I guess, between someone who's curious enough to kind of challenge the status quo, but hasn't got huge expectations about working for a really slick advanced company at the moment. I think it's kind of finding a balance there. And I've had it's not all been doom and gloom. Had some good successes, and certainly probably one of the most interesting has been picking up a woman who was electronics engineer, but she's done digital marketing and then did UX design, and I kind of had to convince her to come and work for us or to work as a contractor for us. Yeah. So she spends 3 days a week here, and she's helping with the marketing and the branding, but also on the side starting to look at if we're developing apps for to change our processes and move from a paper-based system to an app type system. Getting some skills around the human interaction with that and the human design of apps. So that's an interesting.
UX means user experience.
User experience. Yeah. So she's on board for that reason. Not just the digital marketing, but also to help with as we transition away from paper-based systems to that. Can we get the 70-year-old boilermaker and the 16-year-old apprentice to use the same app, and they can both work their way through it to enter data that we're going to need in the future around a product.
Yeah.
So it's that, and certainly the data scientists and the business intelligence, they're both younger sort of workers. They think really differently. Sometimes it's a bit hard to keep up with them around their pace. I think the pace at which we change is a bit frustrating for them. So there's those sort of fundamental ideas. They sort of want to get in there and get it done, but then you have the human side of the business and its culture that kind of slows it down a bit. So there is some challenges in finding people that fit.
Yeah, and I suppose, and look, I'm being asked always by government about, obviously we've just gone through COVID. There's this, I guess, image in people's mind that a lot of people will put out of work and they're all sitting there on the shelf waiting to be re-employed, and they'll take on anything they like, anything we want to offer them actually. And I don't think that's necessarily true. And I know out of the aircraft maintenance industry, there was a lot of people put off, and still, international flights haven't taken off, and pardon the pun, but there's a lot of people who were highly skilled that probably would fit for a lot of engineering firms, but they don't necessarily want to come and work in this engineering firm. So have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, probably not much yet, but we're probably about to, because we've got quite a few roles that we probably need to be filling. We've got a lot of resource gaps, and also gaps where we're trying to drive a different direction, particularly around digital, where we're looking for people around quality assurance or quality control particularly, but not the past mindset. We're looking for someone who can help design or help develop the processes that'll let us do it digitally, and then take that forward and kind of be a champion of that. So yeah, it is a bit of a messy space at the moment. We've got succession going on, so there's a different sort of style of leadership. One's very micromanaged and one's very hands off. which requires lots of systems in place to work, where the other one doesn't really have systems because it's counteractive to the day-to-day micromanagement. And then there's of course the technology disruption going on. We want to pivot from paperwork to apps and digital systems and automation where we can around stores and things like that. So at the moment it is probably maybe more difficult than it probably should be, because we're kind of still feeling our way through how we're going to do this. Where do we start? What are we going to go first with? And also looking at people that can help us understand what we might have been in the past, but also have that forward-thinking view around how could you do it differently.
And with that change, have you used external change agents like contractors or consultants to come in to do that for you, or do you have a methodology of doing that for yourselves?
We've tried a bit of everything. We've tried some support from outside, at a board level, at a technology implementation level. Success and failure in both ways, and we've done some of it ourselves. I think I think you've got to have some people here on the ground that understand the technology, but also have a feel for the past and can tie that together. I don't think integrators are the whole solution to it. And also, our choice to work with universities, Western Sydney and UTS in particular, that's been good and frustrating. The way they operate is the timeline's a bit different to how businesses operate. But then again, in some of the spaces we're in, the uncertainty about where we're really going kind of works. And it certainly let us bring in some skills that we wouldn't have been able to get. So we wouldn't have been able to get a data scientist in here without the support of a university partnership and collaboration. And that in itself taught us a whole bunch of stuff that we probably needed to know, but didn't know we needed to know when we started. So I think it's, there is a bit of a matrix around what you need to make that happen, and it does depend again on the owners, where the business is at, what you're actually doing as a manufacturer, and where you want to go, or what are the possibilities around your product if you're adding digital.
Okay. What about government programs? Have you been involved with Training Services New South Wales or anyone like that to support your business?
Yeah, I have a good network across lots of people, and so we're kind of involved in lots of things, or talking to people. And again, some of these things come off, some of them don't. There's a bit of work we do with the EPP program, that Pathways program. I get involved in that a bit, and again, some of it's a learning experience, some of it's just giving you exposure to the next generation to kind of get a feel for what we're in for. Innovations Connections, work with them, we've got some programs with them done, and there's lots of others that we do want to work with, but finding the time to do that is the challenge. That's probably our biggest challenge now, is resetting ourselves a little bit so we're dealing with business as usual today, and ensuring ourselves around delivering on what we have today and where we get revenue from today, but then having some resources working on some of those other frontiers, particularly around the grants, business development in new spaces and things like that. That's probably kind of where we're at the moment, around what do we need to be doing next to reset it, as well as adjusting our technology or R&D intensity to kind of map what we can actually achieve today, given the lessons we've learned. Every time you learn something, you realise that you probably need to take a step back and get that right before you move to where you thought you were going to be.
Yes. And I'm constantly being asked to come and ask industry their opinion about things. Do you get any sense that there's too much request for information from industry, or is there not enough request for information from industry?
There's certainly a high level of engagement between government, university and industry now. That's changed a lot in the last couple of years. It really has. Maybe it's because I've been more proactive in that space. I don't know. So you're kind of seeing things that are always there, or whether there is actually genuine. But if I think about universities, they're kind of ringing up, chasing things now, where they were never doing that before. And quite willing to have meetings and talk about ideas and things where it was kind of hard to get in the door before. So I think that's definitely something that's changed. There's certainly a lot of activity around government and getting consultation around that, which is probably a good thing. I think.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there needs to be more. I mean, I think it's you've got other things to do too. So
yeah, because that's one thing that I'm always cautious about when I'm talking to industry, because I fear that there's consultation fatigue. And every time, if I turn around to you every three months or sooner every month and say, hey, tell me about your business and what do you need, it pretty much is going to say to me, well, I told you last month and not much has changed, so thanks for calling, but don't call again.
Yeah, I think it needs to be measured.
Yeah.
There needs to be, I mean, as social views change or technology changes and you get some disruptions, well, there may be another pass that's needed.
Yeah.
But there's periods where not much changes.
Yeah.
And at the moment we're kind of in one of those periods, I think, where there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of hype around the possibilities of things, and I feel like at the moment it's a time that we need to just be kind of bedding down and trying to work out how this happens. There's lots of programs out there, there's lots of support, there's lots of things happening.
Yeah.
There's kind of enough on the table at the moment.
So what I'm hearing is you need a bit of space.
Yeah, at the moment I think we do as a business, we need a bit of space just to do what we've got to do, and work our way through all the things we've learned and find our way forward a bit. Yeah.
Well, okay, we've been going almost an hour. Is there anything you'd like to say in addition to let people know about who LA Services are, and maybe if there's anything that you're looking for that is a burning topic on your mind?
I think developing the skills and the trades and the engineering skills and that sort of stuff is critical to the space we play in, which is that critical infrastructure around fuel development, gas distribution, those sorts of things. There's stacks of infrastructure out, and sure, the pivot to renewables is going to change it, but we're still going to need those hard assets. Whether we're talking about hydrogen, whatever, there's still going to be the molecule energy demand that exists. Supporting the development of that and the retainment of that, I think, is important for a country like us. As COVID, I guess, showed, we are an island and we can be pretty separated. So to kind of assume that it's all about, advanced aerospace or something like that, I mean, maybe not. Maybe some of this stuff in the ground that kind of churns out things, and every time you turn the gas on at home, you get gas, or whatever, or later on it's filling your car with hydrogen, whatever it might be. Those matter. So I think the continual push by government to kind of understand that this matters and how do we keep making these trades, supporting them and getting development is important, as well as, I guess, the conversation around in the social context. So helping to get that conversation into schools, so better career support and visibility in schools is really important. As a parent of 3 kids, if I sit back and look at what goes on in some of those schools that they've been through, not a lot of support around what a careers really look like. It's kind of only what was known in the past, and it's nothing like that in the future. It's going to be totally different. Yeah.
So, do you think support for sovereign capability of Australian manufacturing would be a good thing, and to talk that up for careers for future generations? Yeah,
I think there's a place there. That we should be looking at what are all these jobs behind everyday life that manufacturing support. What do they mean, and how are they evolving from what they were and what they were known as? I think that's important. I think we've just got to keep pushing our way through that, and also looking at, from an education point of view, what's needed in the classroom to help develop some of those skills. To build that digital literacy that's needed. So things like all the 365 suite or business intelligence and SharePoint and those sorts of common tools that we're starting to talk about now probably should be conversations in the school classroom, so that they come out and they're known. Just as in the early 90s when spreadsheets started to emerge, we all had to learn that. So it's a matter now of learning the next phase of things and making sure that's part of the curriculum. I think that's really important to help just lift that general knowledge up.
Okay, well, thanks very much, David, for having a chat with me today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy routine, and I don't think this will be the last time I'll want to catch up with you. I'm sure there'll be something happening down the line that I'll be keen to come back and have another chat with you about. So thanks for today, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks a lot, Liam.
All right, mate. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks.
Stop.